Alrighty, in this video, what we're going to do is we are going to put together the client user interface for logging in. So again, there are two ways to log in. We can log in with a token that the launcher acquired during launch and was passed in as a command line parameter into our project. Or if we are in a debug scenario, we can choose from a list of available players. And I find doing that just makes testing a whole lot easier, where you can just, click on the character you want or the user account you want to log in with. Obviously, that functionality is not going to be available for the actual production builds, but it's great for development. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. There's a couple things we need to do here. The first thing that I want to do is I want to hop into our project, our server project, jump over into our server master project, and jump into our login system. I want to get this, just write in some debug stuff that can help us along with building out the UI. So we see on Awake we have proxy debug set available players already passing in a user. Let's go ahead and add a couple more users to this so the list is kind of interesting. I mean, hey, we could go ahead and do admin, and then we can do a concat on that. And we can pass in a enumerable.range, passing in a start of 1, a count of 10, and then do a select based off of that and say number goes into new user details, and then say user number, and then for his for his ID will be number. And what else? His roles will simply be a new hash set of string. So after that, let's go ahead and after we do that .concat, let's go ahead and do a .toArray so it fits the signature of this method. We can clean this up a little bit. Oh, I want to go ahead and have the admin user have the admin role, or I should say roles. Roles.admin, in case we wanted to test displaying things differently if the roles were different. We could probably clean this code up a little bit too. Let's see. I don't know. Or maybe like that. That looks better. Okay, so now we have that. For our login and our debug login, I want to go ahead and log out something. So I'll say log info, and we'll say logging in with token. Now, obviously, in the actual, and then of course we will return our user details. So we'll return deferred.success, and we'll pass in a new user details of 1 admin new hash set string. So not terribly exciting. Obviously, once we actually put this code together, we'll connect to the database and verify that token here. For our debug login, we'll simply say login info, logging in with debug login user ID. And for our join main lobby, we'll say log info joining main lobby, but then I will throw a new RPC exception here because we haven't really implemented the lobby yet, so we don't not implemented. So we'll just do that. And then, of course, for our debug login, we also have to return a deferred.success for our user details. Okay, so that's our login system. Let's go ahead and hit F6 to get that built out. And while that's building, I can move this off the side, well, assuming there aren't any errors, and there weren't. We can move off the side, and we can start designing our login, our debug login window. So again, it's just a window that's going to be added to the canvas, or on its own canvas rather, and it's going to simply be a list of usernames. So if we hop over to scenes, the way I want to implement this is we already have our login system added to this scene. So when we join the login scene and then the login system is created from the server, it attaches to this component right here, which is awesome because we can come in here to the scene and we can work on the scene and build it, build our user interface with the new GUI without having to resort to instantiating prefabs. So if we come over here to the left, let's go ahead and create a UI canvas here. So this will be our login canvas. And for our login canvas, I'm going to right click. We're going to create a panel. And the panel is going to be centered. So I'll come in here and I'll center it like that. And then I'll drag our edges in a little bit, or just maybe give it a width of width of 200 is fine, a height of whatever, because we're going to have this automatically expand as we add items to it. So inside the panel, we will create another panel, and this panel will be up here, and we can go ahead and give it a background here, like black, and maybe make it all black, or maybe semi-transparent black. And then in this panel, we will go ahead and add a UI text. For our text, we will just, come on, you can do it. It's really, oh, here we go. We'll just stretch it like that, and maybe give it a top padding of 5 and a right padding of 5, or a left padding of 5. And then we'll change its text to choose a user to log in as, and we will make it white. So next up on our panel, what I want to do is I want to create a let's go ahead and let's think here. Let's go ahead and create a vertical layout group here, and let's turn off its force expand height. And then on our panel here, we will create a vertical layout group and turn off its force expand height. And maybe we want to give it some padding here. So just 5 pixel padding for that. And then, so the idea here is we will add a bunch of buttons to this panel. So if I, for example, go right click UI, add button, and just duplicate it, that's what we want to show up there. Now, of course, these buttons are going to need vertical layout groups on them, so the size is registered and passed back into the parent vertical layout group. But we can already see how we can improve this user interface a little bit, especially by providing, let's just provide 10, oh, that's not what I wanted at all. Let's actually, let's create a panel within this panel. UI panel, and then I'll take all of these, well, delete all these buttons that don't have that layout group, and then I'll stick this button inside of this panel, and just duplicate it a couple times, and really try to get this to lay out properly. So we'll add another vertical layout group inside of that. And you know, I think that looks good. But obviously it's not expanding at all, so we have to go into our top level panel, and we're going to have to do a content size fitter. And for this, our vertical fit will be the preferred size here. So now we see that as we add, so clicking on this item and hitting Control D, as we add these buttons, it expands in height, which is the behavior that we're looking for. All right, a couple more places we have to add padding. To this panel, I'm going to rename this panel to Button Panel. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a 10 pixel padding all around, and maybe a 5 pixel spacing. And then inside of our buttons, I will be prefabifying this in a moment here, but let's go ahead and give it a top and bottom padding of 5. So now we have this window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all these other buttons that we're not using, and I'm going to turn this button into a prefab. So now the question is where do I put the prefab and what its purpose is? Well, it turns out that there's a lot of scenarios where we need a button with a vertical layout group on it with padding, specifically for adding buttons to lists, like what we're doing right here. So it's so common that I'm going to make this into a general prefab. So we can come up here to create new folder, and I guess I'll call this prefabs, and then maybe within prefabs I'll create a new folder called user interface. And then I'll take this button over here, and I'm going to rename it before I make it into a prefab, and I'll just say button with layout group. And then I'll take this and I'll turn it into a prefab. All right, that's awesome. So we have our button prefab, and we see that it does have the behavior we want when we copy and paste it. So I'll go ahead and delete that out of here. So currently our panel is empty. On this button panel, I do want to get rid of that nasty background in there. So let's go ahead and remove the image component so it looks like this. We could come in here and make this more pretty, obviously, but that's up to you and what you want to do and what you want things to look like. Obviously, this is just for debugging, so I don't really care. So now that we have our prefab, not a prefab, but our whole layout done, let's move this off to the side and write the code for it. So if I hop into here, into our code master server systems login system, we can go ahead and remove this code that we're not using. And we can go ahead and remove that as well. So we do need public references to two things. First of all, we need the public game object button panel. Or how about a debug login button panel? I'm also wanting the ability to show and hide this window in its entirety. So I will go ahead and add another game object for debug login panel. So the debug login panel will be a reference to the whole panel, and then the debug login button panel is the parent for the objects, the buttons we're going to instantiate. And then, of course, we need the button to instantiate. So we're going to say public button, and we'll say public button and say, I don't know, user button prefab or something like that. Okay, so now we need to do our onAwake. So I'm going to go ahead and override our... oh, we don't have that, so I can go ahead and just do public void awake. And for awake, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if Unity editor or Unity or what's that thing called? I'm pretty sure it's just development build. There we go. And then we'll do an else here and then an end if. So if we are in Unity editor or development build, I'm going to say debug login panel set active to true. Otherwise, I'm going to say set active to false. So the moment that this thing is awoken, it will go ahead and properly set the things. Actually, probably better to do this in start because we're referencing components added, connected through these public fields. So, so yeah, the debug login button panel will, I want the debug login panel, dude. Will never display if we are not in a development build or in a Unity editor. Now, for our debug set available players, I will go ahead and just, well, it doesn't really matter. So this shouldn't be called in non-development builds anyway, so I'll just write this code straight out here. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looping through all of those buttons, or all those users, and making buttons for each of them. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say for each var user in users. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to say inner user equals user. And I'm capturing this variable here. And the reason I'm doing that is because we're going to be referencing the user variable within a closure. So we have to capture that variable into a local variable in this block, this scope here, so that we don't capture this variable up here in the for each loop that will change after these on every iteration. So then I'll go ahead and say var button equals instantiate. I'm going to say instantiate, and I'm going to use, let's see here, instantiate, and I'm going to pass in user button prefab. And then for this, I'm going to say button.get component in children. Oh, come on, you can do it. There you go. Text. .text equals user.username. And then I'm going to say button on click add listener. And then I'm going to pass in the closure here, and it's simply going to be a call to a function that a method that I haven't written yet called doLogin. And I'll say doLogin proxy.debugLogin, passing in inner user. Now this is important. Make sure that you are referencing inner user within this closure. Otherwise, you will be referencing the incorrect user after the next iteration of this for each loop. So debugLogin inner user.id. And then finally, the last thing that we have to do is add it to our panel. So I simply have to do button.transform set parent, and then passing in our debug login panel, and then say true for the second parameter, so things don't get skewed. Of course, we do debug button panel.transform. Okay, so let's go ahead and implement our doLogin method. So private void doLogin, and it's going to take in a deferred of user details. And we'll call this, I don't know, login operation. So I'm doing this here because the behavior of a debug login, the behavior of a token login are practically identical. The only difference is what method on proxy we invoke. So we can go ahead and abstract away or basically factor out all the common functionality between the two types of logging in and just write one method. So for this, I'm going to say debug login panel dot set active is false. So while we're logging in, the debug login panel is hidden so that we can't, repeatedly mash the buttons and log in as multiple people. And then I'm going to go ahead and say var status equals context dot prefabs dot instantiate alert dialog. And then I'm going to say set title logging in. And then I'm going to go ahead and say login operation dot on success. So for our on success, we will get a result, And for on success, we're simply going to do context. And here we're going to have to use a service that we don't have access to yet, that we haven't written. But basically, I want to consolidate all of our authentication and authorization logic into a single class, which, you know, makes a whole lot of sense. But we haven't written that yet, so we're going to write this against a property that doesn't exist yet. I'm simply going to say context dot auth dot authenticate details. Or res.value. Value. What are you doing here? Result. Derp. Okay, and then after we do that, we'll simply say context load scene, and we'll do lobby, and then we'll do on success, and then we'll do on level loaded, which will be another thing there. Actually, you know what? Since load scene returns a deferred, we can actually go ahead and say, instead of saying on success, res, and all that fun stuff, we should be able to do on success then, and then we simply return context load scene lobby. And this should return a deferred. Do I not have a... so then, which one am I using here? I'm doing deferred of user details and user details. It doesn't seem like we have a deferred that that has a result that's able to be chained with a deferred that does not have a result, and that's just a little bit of oversight on my end. But we should be able to easily fix this. If I come back to Buzz MMO and jump into base async, and then for our deferred of 1, come on, you can do it, Visual Studio. I know you can. It's frozen for me. I'll be right back. And I'm back. So, yeah. We're going to go into async deferred of 1. And we need another then. And so, let's go ahead and come down here. And the other... Well, wait a sec. Right here, we have return... the problem is that these funcs all return deferred of result. So, we'll do a public deferred, then, of func deferred of t result, and then deferred, just a normal deferred. And then we'll call this then. And for this then, let's make sure, okay, it's just killing me because I'm not returning anything. So I simply have to do var next equals new deferred. On always, def goes into if not, def is valid. Next, set result, false, def, error, and return. And then we simply do next, join, then def. And put a semicolon here, and return our next. So that should satisfy the signature requirement that we need here. So I'll go ahead and hit F6 to get this build out. And then I'll move this off to the side. And so now the error goes away. So now we can properly defer on that. However, if our login operation fails, I do want to have an onFail handler here. So I want to say onFail, and we're simply going to do res goes into, and I'm going to say, let's see here. For this logging in, I do want to say set can dismiss to false. And then on fail, I want to say context prefabs instantiate alert dialog, set title can't log in, and then we'll say set message. Maybe we should break this out here, break up this method chaining here. And then set message to res.error, and then we will we'll go ahead and let that show. So that's what happens if that fails during this time. And we also want to do an on always here. On always status.close. All right, it looks like we have another issue with signatures. So we do need to override the on always method to, well, let's see here. Yeah, we do need to provide a new on always so that we can return a deferred of t if we invoke on always on a deferred of t. That's another oversight. A handful of these issues are going to come up. We just need to make sure that our... so we already have our on fails and on successes. We do have an on always here, though. Let's see here. Oh, our on always is the one that doesn't take in a parameter. That's why. So if we just do a res, even if we don't use that parameter, and oftentimes if I don't use a parameter in a lambda, I will name it underscore to indicate that it's not important. We're just doing that here to satisfy the signature of the method. All right, so now that we've done that, at this point, if we get a success here, that means that that we're ready to log in. So I'm going to say, or that we're loaded. So I'm going to say then. Blank goes into context dot join, or sorry, proxy dot join main lobby, and what are you doing there? There you go. And then finally we will say on fail. So if we fail here, I want to say res goes into context prefabs alert, or sorry, instantiate alert dialog, set title, can't join main lobby, res, oops. Oh, come on. What are you doing to me? Set message, res error. And then we'll simply say context dot load scene login. Okay. Let's walk through this, because this is an example, again, of doing some really complex logic, but doing it very simply with our deferred implementation. So we start off with our login operation, which is either going to be debug login or login with token, right? And if it fails, we tell them you can't log in. We set the message to error. Whether or not it fails, we close the dialog box. Then we authenticate ourselves. So we set our authentication data to what we received as a result. Then we load the lobby scene. Once we're done loading the lobby scene, we then tell the proxy or the server to join the main lobby. And if that fails, we say we can't join the main lobby, and we go back into the login screen. So again, there's so much stuff going on right here, but it's just a handful of lines of code, and it reads very, very well. And that's really the most important thing here. All right, so before we can test at least our debug login, let's go ahead and create our authentication service. So I don't know where I want to put that. If I want to put that in infrastructure or straight up in code, let's put it in infrastructure, because it's not, our authentication service doesn't really do a whole lot other than store what user is currently logged in. So I'm just going to call this auth service. And our auth service will have a couple interesting things here. We'll have a public bool is logged in, get private set. We'll have a public user details user get private set. I'm also going to do a couple of handy things here. I'm going to do a public bool is admin get private set. For the constructor here, he is going to take in nothing. Actually, there's no reason to even have a constructor on this, so I won't worry about it. We'll have a public void authenticate user details user, which will simply set these parameters. So user is logged in as true, user equals user, is admin equals user roles contains, and we're going to pass in roles dot admin. I'm also going to do a very simple, handy little helper method here. I'm going to say is in role string role, which will simply defer to user roles contains role. So if we have to do a role check, it's a lot. This will just shortcut the amount of code we have to write. Obviously, if the user's not logged in, this will throw an error. So we'll say return is logged in question mark otherwise false. It is going to tell us to do that, and that is actually significantly cleaner. And I don't know why I didn't think of that in the first place. So is logged in and user roles contains role. Okay, so now let's go ahead and instantiate our auth service. So I'm going to jump over to the game context, and underneath our prefabs, I'm going to say public auth service auth get private set. And then I'm going to scroll down to our top level objects. I'm simply going to say auth equals new auth service. So again, nothing, it's just a bag of properties that contains data. I mean, obviously in the future, you might want to do something like add an event here, or maybe some more logic for checking different authentication, like can you do this, can you do that, blah, blah, blah. This is a good place to put that sort of stuff. But right now it's really simple. So if we come back into our login system, that pretty much should wrap this up. So let's go ahead and jump into Unity and see what happens when we run this code. Once it, gets its act together and actually decides to move over to this monitor. Okay, so I already have my server running, so now I simply have to log into our loader, and hit play and see what happens. All right, awesome. So we did get into our login screen, but we got an awesome error here, which is probably not what we wanted. Multiple event stream. Oh, that's one thing I'm going to fix in a moment here. But let's go ahead and identify these null reference exceptions first. Oh, yeah. I totally forgot to set the properties of the login system to point to this this thing. That's my bad. First of all, I will go ahead and delete this event system entirely. And then for our login system, I'm going to drag on over our button panel into our debug login button panel. And I'll drag in the top level panel into our debug login panel. And then for our user button prefab, I'm going to do prefabs user button with layout group. Now if I hop back over into loader, hit play, check that out. It's not the prettiest thing in the world. I'm wondering why there's so much space right there. If we open up the panel, button panel. Oh, I didn't add the buttons to the button panel. Let's jump back into login. Wow, how did that happen? Our debug login panel. Okay, that's all right. So the problem is in the code. So let's jump back over here. And right here, instead of debug login panel, we want debug login button panel. You guys probably already noticed that mistake already. But it's kind of hard to look at code and talk at the same time. Okay, so there are our users. So now, if I bring over my my logs, which you can't see, and hit user 1, okay, first of all, I did get an exception on the server, which I probably want to address real fast. So, oh no, the error that I got was what I wanted. The error was the not implemented. Good, that's what I wanted. And check this out. So we say lobby -1 cannot be loaded because it's not been added to the build settings, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter because can't join main lobby not implemented. Okay, let's go ahead and create our lobby scene real fast. So I'm going to come up here, new scene. I'm going to save this out into scenes lobby. And then I'm going to jump over here into our build settings and add it to our current thing. So now we shouldn't get that error. So if we jump back into the loader and we log in as a user, we no longer get that error. But we do get a can't join main lobby not implemented. Furthermore, we're not getting a list of our users anymore. So let's go ahead and actually fix that real fast. In our login system, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a private IEnumerable of user details, available debug users. And let's see how we can do this. Well, actually, I'm not too concerned about this, actually. I'm not too concerned about it because this error condition that we put together should only happen if there's a bug. So, yeah, I'll just leave it as it is. Okay, let's go ahead and implement our actual login, the actual login method that we're going to be using in the production system. So, yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remind myself what the command line argument that we used was. So if I can go ahead and find that thing over here and jump into our launcher, which I haven't opened up in forever. Jump into here. Not the cleanest looking code, honestly. What's that yelling about? Access to modified closure. Don't care. Where do we actually launch the client? Right here. And right here. Okay, so it's dash token equals blah is what we're doing for that. So let's go ahead and write a command line parser that will parse out dash x equals y parameters from our command line. And that's actually going to be really simple to do. So I'm going to jump over into our game context. And then for our to-do command line, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the top and I'm going to add a new private variable here. So let's go ahead and just add it right here. Private dictionary string command line arguments. And then for to-do command line, I'll just simply remove the to-do because we are implementing this right now. And it's really easy. Simply command line arguments equals, and then I'm wrapping this in parentheses. That's important. from argument in environment get command line args, let trimmed equals argument.trim. Of course, to do let, I need to import system.link, so system.link just appeared at the top. And what do you... Okay, it's just being weird. Where trimmed first or default equals dash. And then I'm going to go ahead and do let split equals trimmed.split. And we'll split on... here, I want to use the overload that allows me to specify a count. So I'm going to say, I'm going to create a new character array of simply equals, and I'll specify a count of 2. And then where split length equals 2. And something's really messing up here. Length. Wow, I've been writing too much JavaScript, haven't I? Then I'll simply say select split. All right, let's figure out what this error is first. Cannot apply blah, blah, blah between blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that just means I need to do a string here. Then I'm going to say dot to dictionary. Key goes into key at 0, substring 1. V goes into V at 1. So we're extracting the first parameter of the split and chopping off its dash, and then we're simply extracting the second thing of the split. And then I'm going to do a comma, and fortunately the toDictionary allows us to pass in an equality compare. I want our command line to be case insensitive, so I'm going to pass in a equality compare, which will be string compare invariant culture ignore case. So that's it. That's all the code we need in order to extract our command line. But at this moment, it is a private field. So we do have to come down here, and I'm going to create a public void or public string get command line argument string key. And this will simply return command line arguments at key. I also want to do a public string get command line argument of string key and string default. Or at default. There we go. And for this, I'll simply say string value, and I'll say return not, or sorry, command line arguments, try get value, key out value, question mark value, colon default. So we're simply extracting out a thing from the dictionary, and if we can't find it, we return a default. Pretty straightforward. So now what we can do is in the login system, what I'm going to do here is right here, I'm going to, because the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to write a method. I'm going to write a method called debug or login with token. The reason I'm doing that is because this else prevents any sort of syntax highlighting or error checking or anything like that. So I want to reduce the amount of code I have in these if-else statements for writing purposes. So then I'll simply invoke the debug with, or sorry, login with token. And I can go ahead and grab this bit too and take it out and put it in our new private void login with token. And you guys know me, I make typos all the time. So I'm going to double click on this, Control C, Control V, so the method name is absolutely correct. All right, for our login with token, we'll simply say do login, and we'll pass in proxy login. And we're going to pass in context get command line argument of token. And that's it. So that's our login with token. We can go ahead and test this really easily. I'm going to hop over here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new build. So we're going to say, I guess just build and run. We're going to do PC Max standalone. We're not going to check development build because remember, development build will make our debug thingy appear. I'm going to simply say build. And then we will do BuzzMMO build client, and we're just going to replace that. And say yes. And then it's going to go ahead and build all that up for us. And then once it's built, I'm going to go ahead and execute it directly from the command line to simulate what will happen when our... so there's our MMO. So if we come up here and open command line, say BuzzMMO -token equals hello world and hit enter. And then hit play. Now in our logs, move this out of the way, our logs, which ran away from me somehow. Where did you go? There you are. Okay, so we are getting an error here, unfortunately. Don't know... Oh, never mind, we're not getting an error. but we're not getting a login. Let's see here. Figure that out. I do need to come in here and make a big change, or a very important change. I do need to come over here and say edit, where are you? Project settings, where is an editor? No, it's not an editor. What was I thinking? Edit project settings, it's player, isn't it? And I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to set that checkbox that will make it run when it's in the background. Which, am I blind? I might be blind. No, I'm not blind. I just forgot where it was. It's under resolution and presentation. It's something you only have to click once per project, and I haven't clicked that in a while. Anyway, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and pop open our output log for our BuzzMMO. So I'm going to hop over into BuzzMMO data, and I'm going to open up output log and see if there was an exception thrown that caused that to fail. All right, we did get a object reference not set to an instance of an object with login with token. So the good news is login with token is being executed. The bad news is we're getting a null reference exception. So that's interesting here. Let me open that again. What exactly did it say? And were there any other errors before that? Okay, no other errors before that. It's just object reference not set to an instance of an object. Login with token. So could it be the debug login panel? I don't think it is. It can't be... Ooh, it could be context. That's because I haven't yet gotten the context yet. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this debug login set active. I'm going to put it back in here. And then I'm on connected. I'm going to say, if not Unity editor and, oops, not development build, then login with token. I bet I know exactly what's going on. So what's going on is the start is invoked before we're connected, before we have access to our proxy or to our context. And so as a result, those were null, and that's why that exception got thrown. At least I'm fairly certain that's why the exception got thrown. But let's go ahead and prove me right here. Let's go ahead and build that out. Just wait a moment. Okay, so now that that's built, I'll come over here and I'll run it again with the token. Hit play. There we go. So, of course, can't join main lobby not implemented. That's totally fine. But if we come over here into our logs, we see that logging in with token, hello world. And that is how we log in. So now I can bring over my thingy here, my roadmap, and I can go ahead and I can cross this video out. The next thing coming up is we're going to be doing our server prep and then our server services. And at that point, we should, and then our server system. And so at that point, we actually can log in. We do need to take a step back in the next video and talk about how our database is going to be loaded in, how we're going to access the database, how our IOC is going to work, how the services are injected, all that fun stuff. Because now we finally have a situation where we need a connection to the database from within the server. So we're going to spend next video doing that and getting that ready. Once we're done with that, we can go ahead and create our main lobby service, which is the service responsible for logging into the lobby. And then we can finally implement our login system. I don't know, might be able to do the login system before the main lobby service. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But the point is we're getting pretty close to our working lobby. So we'll see you guys in the next video.